Okay, show you what we can do with a bit of custom filtering and data editor logic. So I've got some sales data, a couple of years of like random sales data. And on this screen, I've got some filters. I've got some big numbers. Another choice here I'll come back to. I've got a couple of charts and I've got a data grid. And everything on this screen is basically managed by the filters. And none of these components have any filter conditions. So for example, if we look at the charts over here, so there's no filter on that. And there's no filter on this chart. And on the data grid, there's no filter, right? So by default, it's going to show you all, but we can start filtering. So let's say we just want to see data from Bobby Darren. Then straight away, like this updates, and we see here it's filtered by Bobby Darren. The charts get filtered just by Bobby Darren, and our data grid is only showing data for Bobby Darren. We can go further. We can say, okay, we're just interested in a particular product. So perhaps the Galactic Vortex Warp Drive. And you can see, so Bobby's sold 19 of those, total sales of that, and then this is filtered as well. We can also do multiple selections, so perhaps Bobby and also Christina and the other Christina. And so that's combining the data from all three, and it's been applied to all components. The only difference is with the chart. With the chart, or the two charts, that's fixed at a 12-month period of sales by month and units by month, but we can switch a year. So we can do 2023, and it's showing data for 2023, but it's still applying these filters here. So, and you see down here, right? Clear those, and we see the data for all, okay? And what Alan was interested in was a date range, so we can do that as well. So let's say we want to go back, I don't know, to the middle of last year. Let's say from the 1st of July until today. And you'll see that update. So now it's showing 1st of July 2023 to 10th of February 2024. So that filtering is applied to these big numbers here, and it's also applied to here. And again, I can say if I want filter by a particular salesperson, same thing, and it's applying this date range and that salesperson. All right, so how does all that work? Let's dive inside the data editor. So I'll quickly run through the table. So we have a users table, that's obvious. We have a list of salespeople, which is nothing special there. We have a list of products, just a product ID and a product name. We have some sales. I've got about 1,200 rows in here, and it's just random stuff. So it has a date, a sale date, the ID of the salesperson, the product ID, and an amount. And then there's some logic here, which I'll come back to. I have a list of months, and this table is what actually drives the charts. And you can see there's not much in this table. I'll explain this shortly. Another table with a list of years, and then the helper table, and the screen actually sits on top of the helper table. And as you can see, there's only a couple of columns in the data table. Actually, most of the logic goes on in the user profiles table, so I'll start there. So I have some user-specific columns to capture the filter choices. So we've got one for start date, end date, salesperson, product, and also for the year. So that's what these first few columns are here. I have this if then else column, which just sets a default year. So if this is empty, we set it to 2023. These take a joined list. So because they take a joined list, I need to split both of these, and then build relations both to the salespeople table and the products table, and then get a joined list of the names. So for example, if I select a couple more people like that, and if I select a couple of products and go back to here in the users table, we'll see that. So in the sales folks IDs, we've got that list, joined list, and the same thing in the products, and then we split that, and then we get a joined list of names. And the only purpose of that is just to display those like hints on the screen. And then there's a few columns to construct the labels for the charts and the period and what have you. Nothing special going on there. And then a template column just to basically give a summary of what the filter conditions are. So that's that one. And then in terms of applying the filtering logic, that goes on in the product and sales table. So we have the first few columns, which is like the raw data. Then a couple of relations here just to get the salesperson's name and the product name, so we can display that in the data grid. And then the filtering logic is basically these few columns here. So I have 3 if then else columns, 1 for the date range, 1 for the salesperson, and 1 for the products. And they're all, well, the date range is a little bit different. So basically we look at the start date. If that's empty, we return true. If the end date is empty, we also return true. So it won't apply the date range filtering unless we have both a start date and an end date. So then if we do, it looks at the date. If that's before the start date that we've set in the filter, then return null, ignore it. And if the date is after the end date we've set in the filter, ignore that. And then anything that falls through means it must be within the date range, so we return true. So that's how the date filtering works. And then for the people and the products, it's quite simple one. If the filter, the user-specific filter column, if that's empty, return true, because that means we're not trying to filter by a salesperson. And otherwise, if that joined list of sales folks IDs in the user-specific column, if that includes the salesperson ID from this row, then return true. All right. And then the same, exactly the same logic for the products. If it's empty, return true. If it includes the product ID, return true. And then because it's an AND filter, what we do is we have like a match all column here, which will only return true if all 3 of those previous columns are checked. So what we do with that is we use that one to build a query. So from the helper table, I have this query selected. And what that does is it takes that filter it looks in the sales table, and it just matches where that if match all is checked. And that is actually what's used, excuse me, as the source of the data grid. So back here in the data grid, you'll see this uses the sources, the selected query. So that's all you need for that to apply all of that filtering to that data grid. Like I said, there's no additional filter conditions or anything else. Then going back to the sales table, there's 2 or 3 more columns here to apply the filtering to the chart. First of all, we pull out the year from the date of the sale. So this date here, so that's just a math column that does year date on that. Then we have another math column to pull out the month of the date, just the month number. And then we have an if match column. And that's basically applying the same logic over here, because we want to match on the people and we want to match on the products. And then also the sale year. If the sale year equals the year that's been set in the filter in the user profile. So in the user profile, we have this year, or actually this if year, which is set by this one here. So if I switch that to 2024, I only get that. So back here in the sales table, that is used in this column here. Finger trouble. So that is used here. If the chart sale year, which is I got from the previous math column, if that equals the one in the filter in the user profile, return true. And then this column here is used in a similar way as the match all, except in the months table. So here I have another query here, which it looks again the sales table, and it looks at that chart if match column, if that's checked or true, and if the sale month equals this row sale month. So that gives us different data for each month of the year. And then I just do two roll-ups through that query, one to get the sum of the amount, and that gives me a sum for each month, and another one to get the count, the number of units sold. And we have the same thing in the helper table, which is used for the big numbers, which is this one here. We do a sum of sales through this query to get a sum of that, and that's applying that to with the filters being applied, and the count of the units, same thing, and that's used in the two big numbers. So back here in these big numbers, you've got one is using the sum of sales, which is a roll up through the query, and this one is using the count of units, which again is taking it through that query. And then on the charts, we just use the month name as the x-axis, and one uses the sum of sales for the y-axis, and the other one uses the count of sales, or the count of units. So that's it. I've rabbited on for a long time, sorry about that, but let me know if I had any questions.